Greetings, ethics students. I'm here to talk with you today about a particular view in the area of value theory. Now, as you recall, value theory is about what things are fundamentally valuable. It asks the question, what is the good? What's the good thing that we ought to try and pursue or to maximize? And so, as we think about that, there's a lot of problems that arise, and there's lots of different answers that one can give. But one very common answer to that question takes seriously the idea that the good is different for different people. So you might think that each of us has different desires and wishes and preferences, and so the things that are good for me are going to be different than the things that are good for you because my desires and interests and preferences are different from yours. And thus, when we ask that big question of ethics, how should I live? The answer is going to be different for each and every one of us. You should live the life that's going to help fulfill and build and explore your preferences, help satisfy your desires. I should live the life that helps satisfy mine. Those desires might not be the same thing at all. You might want to have a large family and be devoted to family, and I might want to have no family and be devoted to some other cause that's equally valuable, but would require that I not have children. Right? I might want to become a physician that works in extremely dangerous areas, and doing so would thus endanger the well-being of my children by putting my life at risk and possibly causing them great harm. Different strokes for different folks. You want big family, good for you. I don't, good for me. That's the idea we want to explore today. It's based on this desire satisfaction theory of value. And that's intuitive. We should be familiar with that view. It's something that is common in the world around us. And so as we think about this view, it'll be helpful to have a contrasting view to start. The contrast of the desire satisfaction view, or any contrasting view, is called an objective theory of welfare, or an objective welfare theory. The idea that there are certain objective characteristics or features of the good life, that whether you desire it or not, that's what the good life is. And there's many different types of objective welfare theories, but one famous one goes back all the way to the beginnings of philosophy in the Western tradition to Socrates. Socrates quite famously claimed that the unexamined life is not worth living. That if you are not self-critical, self-aware, challenging yourself to gain knowledge, to improve your character, then your life would be better off being over. You would literally be better off dead. Those are harsh words from Socrates, but that's what he thought. The unexamined life is not worth living. This is an objective theory of value. It implies that knowledge is essential for the good life. Without moral knowledge, without self-knowledge, you could not possibly live the good life. No matter how satisfied your life was, no matter how much wealth or power you may have, if you lack moral knowledge, you are not living well. That's what Socrates claims. So, keep that in mind as a frame of reference. On that view, there's something you just have to do and have to have, an obligation that we all share, a characteristic of the good life that if we don't have that, no matter how much we're enjoying life, how much fun we're having, or how satisfied we are with our lives, it's still not the good life. And that is common to all objective theories of welfare, objective welfare theories of value. Now, contrast that with the view I kind of outlined earlier. On the desire satisfaction theory, rather than an objective welfare theory, the desire satisfaction theory claims that the good life is just getting what you want. Socrates thought the good life was the life of examination, of cultivating self-knowledge, moral knowledge, and then living one's life out in accordance with that wisdom. But the desire satisfaction theory says, no, if you don't want knowledge, if you don't want to be wise, if you don't want to study ethics, if you don't want to be critical of yourself, so what? No problem. The good life is whatever you want, getting what you want. That is the desire satisfaction view. So the good life is the most fulfilled life, the life where you get the most of your desires fulfilled. This is very common in the world around us. I like to call this the ethics of consumerism, right? The entire ethos of being a consumer and being a good consumer and, experiencing a great deal of life is this idea that you should get out there and get what you want. Go out there, get what you want, consume it, buy it, purchase it, make money, get the stuff that you want, live your life according to it. That assumption is very common in our society today. Anytime somebody says you should pursue your dreams or live the life you love, those sorts of aphorisms, those sayings that we hear all the time, those all assume that the good life is the life where you get what you want. That's why you should pursue your dreams, because that's what you want. That's why you should live the life you love, because you're getting what you want in that life. So this is a widespread assumption in our society, and is very different from Socrates' account. Now, this view has a lot to be said for it. There's a lot of good things about the desire satisfaction view. First and foremost, it takes the differences in individuals, the diverse interests and preferences we have, it takes those very seriously. Socrates' view seems a little bit paternalistic, right? It seems like he's telling us how we ought to live our lives and not taking seriously what we want or what we like. And we rightly bristle at that notion sometimes. So one of the great virtues of the desire satisfaction theory, one thing to like about it, is that it takes our individual interests seriously. That's a good thing. Something else that's nice about it is that it makes the task of ethics pretty clear and pretty easy. Right? So if the good life is the life where I get what I want, when I ask the question of ethics, how should I live? What should I do? Well, the way to answer that question is to get really clear about what it is that I want and the means that are going to be most effective for achieving it. So, right, I need to be really clear on what I want. Do I want to live a life where what I'm doing is traveling the world and I want to experience all types of different places and peoples, events, cities, locales? If that's what I want, then the steps to achieve that are constrained somewhat. It's going to require pretty significant financial resources, so I'm going to have a job or inheritance or something where I have enough money to fly around the globe. I'm also going to have a fair bit of free time to be able to do that. So I'm going to have to take the steps necessary to have that free time. And other things might be incompatible with that. Right? If you want to do that, you probably don't want to be a dairy farmer, just for example. Having to milk those cows makes it hard to fly to France on a whim. So if you're thinking about, wow, I would like to be a dairy farmer, but I'd also like to travel the world, do whatever I want, see lots of different places, you're going to have to figure that out and get really clear on that. That's going to be the first task of ethics. Now, once you get clear on what you desire, then you just take the steps necessary to achieve it. That ethics becomes that simple. And that's the way most of us think about living our lives. We try and figure out, what is it I really want out of life? And then, what's it going to take for me to get it? If the desire satisfaction theory is correct, then that common way of thinking, that basic moral knowledge that we think we have, is correct. And so that's a virtue of the theory, that it's pretty consistent with our current beliefs and our intuitions about what ethics is all about and how ethics ought to work. So that's nice too. A third virtue of the desire satisfaction theory, something that it really benefits from, is that it makes moral motivation easy. Many theories about how we ought to live our lives leave as an open question, okay, but why should I want to do that? So when Socrates says, you need to be self-critical and examine your life and make sure you get moral knowledge of yourself. When Socrates says that, you might go, yeah, but all that self-analysis is tedious and boring and I don't want to do it. So why should I want that knowledge if I don't like it? And simply, Socrates doesn't have as good an answer to that question as the desire satisfaction theory has. For the desire satisfaction theory, if someone says to it, okay, well, why should I want to live the good life? The desire satisfaction theorist can come back and say, because it already is what you want. The good life is just getting what you want. So there's no need to answer the motivation question. You already want it. So we've already got this built-in motivation to live morally and to try and achieve the good life. So those are great virtues for the theory. First, respects our diversity as individuals. Second, it makes moral knowledge easy and is consistent with our current moral intuitions. And third, it also solves the moral motivation problem. It gives us a good reason to live morally. We can take those virtues and we can kind of put them into a simple argument to try and support the desire satisfaction theory. It's based on this notion of motivation in particular. The book calls something like this the motivational argument for desire satisfaction theory. So quite simply, premise one, the good life must be something that anyone would want. If it's a good life and nobody wants it, it's really not good. Okay, so premise one, the good life must be something that anyone would want. Premise two, the only thing that anyone would want is to have their particular desires fulfilled. Right? This is because we all have different desires, and so there's no one particular desire that we all share and that we all want. But there is this general wanting to have our particular desires fulfilled that we do all share. So the only thing that anyone would want is to have those particular desires fulfilled. Therefore, the good life is just that life where we get what we want, where our desires are fulfilled. That's an argument for the desire satisfaction theory. The good life must be something anyone would want. The only thing everybody wants or that anyone would want is to have their particular desires fulfilled. So the good life is the life where your particular desires are fulfilled. A nice, valid argument for the desire satisfaction theory. Now, I'll leave it to you to reflect for a moment on whether or not you think those premises are true or false. Think about each. Premise one, the good life must be something anyone would want. True or false, and why? Premise two, the only thing that anyone would want is to have their particular desires fulfilled. True or false, and why? Reflect on those for a moment. Then we'll move on and think of some criticisms of the desire satisfaction theory. All right, hopefully you've paused to think about it a little bit. If you haven't, hit that pause button and think about it a little bit. And then come back here and hit play. And now that you're back, let's talk about some of the problems with the desire satisfaction theory. We talked about its virtues. We talked about an argument to support it. But let's think about some problems. One major problem for the desire satisfaction theory is the problem of disappointment. Oftentimes, people find that when they satisfy their particular desires, once they get what they thought they wanted, they find out that they didn't really want it after all. It didn't result in living the good life. They may have gotten their particular desires fulfilled, their particular desires have been met, and in the end, they're left feeling empty or hollow. The textbook has some really nice examples of that, nice stories to tell. So if you haven't taken a look at those, be sure to do so. They're very illuminating. And if it's the case that we can have our desires fulfilled and then find out that it turns out we didn't really want them after all, well then that premise two, that the only thing everybody wants is to have their particular desires fulfilled, would actually be false. If there's desires that we get them fulfilled and then find out we don't want them, well then the good life wouldn't be the life where all our desires are fulfilled. The good life would be the life where our true desires or our most deeply held desires, our more fundamental desires are fulfilled. Not all of them, right? We would want to not fulfill those ones that left us feeling empty and hollow even though we thought we wanted them. We'd want to fulfill those ones that are our true desire, our heart's desire, we might say. But the desire satisfaction theory might be able to accommodate that. So far it can't, right? So if we adjusted it and said, The good life is getting what you truly or really want. It's getting your heart's desire. That might help it out. So that might help it avoid this problem of disappointment. But once we do that, we run into a much deeper problem that we're going to see in just a moment. Before we hit that, there's another problem, the problem of impoverished desires. So many of us, we don't like to say this, but if we're honest with ourselves, many of us have desires that would be harmful to others if we acted out on them. Take extreme cases, one that most of us don't have, but there's some people that have desires to cause other people physical pain. Right? They are people who take pleasure in causing pain to others. In that case, if you get what you want, getting what you want might actually mean doing harm to another. And then we run into this conflict of interest that raises a moral quandary for us. Okay, well, if there's a conflict, should I still get what I want or not? And the desire satisfaction theorist could just bite the bullet and go, yep, you should still try and get what you want. And that other person should try and get what they want. And if they come into conflict, then it's just a competition and winner takes all. That's how it ought to go. They could take that route. But there are other problems, other interests people have that are harmful, that are much more worrisome. It gets us back to kind of that notion of disappointment. Some people have deep desires to do harm to themselves. Most obvious examples of this are things like people that are suicidal, people that have deep interest in actually causing physical harm to themselves, cutting or some other sort of activity. They have desires to do that, and if they fulfill those desires, it's going to harm them. But they also have this general desire to not be harmed. And so there's this inner conflict where they can't fulfill one desire without doing damage to another. And so getting what they want, in that case, is impossible. And that leads to a contradiction. It causes a problem for thinking that the good life is the life where you get what you want. So, and then this segues into the most serious problem. Even if you allow the desire satisfaction theory to state we should live the lives where we fulfill our heart's desire, our deepest desires, but not the desires that we just think we want but don't really want, the ones that are going to leave us feeling hollow and empty. Even many people hold these desires that are deeply held desires, but the fulfillment of which is just very hard to believe that they would actually lead to a good life. There are famous examples of this sort of thing. Famous hoarder in Britain who collected all sorts of random things. His deepest desire was to just complete his collections of random things. He had stacks and stacks of newspapers going back 30 years because he wanted complete sets. He had 6 rusting cars in his backyard because he wanted a matched set, even though he couldn't care for them and they were dilapidated and falling apart. When he was fulfilling those desires, according to the desire satisfaction theorist, he was doing exactly what he should. He was buying those newspapers and buying those cars. He was living the good life, living the dream. But when we look at that, we have to ask, is that really the good life? Is that really the life that anyone would want? Even abstracting away from the particulars, just getting all those small desires fulfilled, that's not really what we want out of life, is it? Because part of what we want out of life is to shape our desires in certain ways. And the desire satisfaction theorist cannot allow for that. The desire satisfaction theorist can't distinguish between desires that we should fulfill and desires that we shouldn't. They just can't. Because once they do that, the good life is no longer about getting what we individually want, but it's first about wanting what we should. And that requires an objective theory of welfare. And that is the deepest problem for the desire satisfaction theory. And it presents us with a very important lesson. The ethics of consumption, the ethics of consumerism, go out there, get what you want, work hard, buy the stuff you want and consume it and live the life you want to live. That ethics is mistaken. It leads to clear contradictions that show that the view is incorrect. Getting what we want because sometimes we hold desires are harmful for others can be clearly damaging and immoral in many ways. But it's also impossible for us to really get what we want without distinguishing between good desires and bad desires. And in order to do that, we have to have an objective account of the good. If, as the desire satisfaction theory says, the good is just getting what we want, then we can't figure out what the good wants are and what the bad wants are. Every desire, getting what we want, is good on that account. And so this tells us that living the life dedicated to self-fulfillment, to getting what we want, can't possibly be the good life. And that's a powerful lesson. We must first want what we should before we should get what we want. And wanting what we should means first figuring out what we should want, figuring out what the objective good is, and then shaping our desires to conform to it. And as we proceed through the rest of the course, we'll look at other accounts of what the good is. And we'll start using that as a way to think about how we ought to shape our desires and live our lives as we're thinking about just what that correct objective account of the good is. I look forward to exploring that with you.